One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours, oh, one day.
I'm here today at the 58th anniversary at North Carolina A&T. I'm with
Frank McCain.
Frank, could you tell me what's significant about today?
Well, today represents the 58th anniversary of the lunch counter sit-ins that the four gentlemen from North Carolina A&T State University did on February 1st, 1960. One of those four men, my father, Franklin McCain, along with Jibreel, Khazan, David Richmond, and Joe McNiel, four A&T college freshmen.
Okay. And who's going to be our guest speaker today?
Our guest speaker today is April Ryan. She's not an Aggie. She happens to be a graduate of Morgan State, but we still have a lot of HBCU love, and so we look forward to hearing from April. She's a young correspondent with CNN, and we're looking forward to hear what April has to share with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
This is Terry with TaJtalk.com at North Carolina A&T State University 50th anniversary of the sit-in.
Thank you all for joining us this morning. I have two questions for Ms. Ryan, actually about her book, The Presidency in Black and White. So Ms. Ryan, in your book, you describe your experience covering the White House. What is the most interesting experience you've had while working in that role?
21 years, 21 years. Each day is a different experience. Each day is a different experience. I can't pinpoint one moment over another, but I would say this last administration has been very challenging for me, and as you can see, it has been. And I'm supposed to have my book finished today it's called Under Fire. We're here today because we are remembering what four courageous freshmen did. If it had not been for them, and I get emotional about this because I sit in a very strange, unique perch, and I see everything come to the White House, from war to peace and everything in between, and issues of race is that in between. Issues of race played back then and they play today. The African American community is still a community with the highest numbers of negatives in almost every category. And everything comes to a president of the United States. Everything. So being here today and seeing the two surviving of the four touched my heart. I'm very emotional because I'm an African American woman who grew up in Baltimore, still live not far from where I grew up. If it had not been for the sit-in, if it had not been for those garbage workers whose anniversary we commemorate their death around this time as well. If it had not been for Dr. King, this is the 50th anniversary of his death this year. If it had not been for Congressman John Lewis, if it had not been for Julian, if it had not been for so many, and everyone plays a part. It's not just about one person or one issue. We all play a part in some kind of way. With us, in journalism, we tell the stories of those who make history. And that's important as well. That we are able to tell our stories. There's so much wrapped into all of this, but it's indeed an honor and a pleasure to be here today. Of who I am, and I am very proud. She would always tell me about, stories about Charles Drew. She would tell me about the sit-ins. She would tell me about Woolworths and the Woolworths counter. She would tell me so many different things. I was that kid who would listen to the vinyl record of Dr. King, the I Have a Dream speech. But I just happened to be a White House correspondent who happens to be a CNN political analyst, been at AURN for 21 years at the White House. And all of this, I guess, sometimes plays into when we have issues of Black History Month, which we're in now. I recall that, we tell the stories, we bring the stories, that may not be told, if there's something that comes up, if there's a crescendo moment about different things, you have the history and the knowledge of the past to be able to bring it when other people can't. So that's it.
Greensboro, North Carolina, the evening of January 31st, 1960. On the campus of North Carolina Agricultural and Technical College, in dormitory room 2128 of Scott Hall, a strategy session is about to take place.
Go on, David.
These college freshmen are about to radically change their world. Tomorrow, the four of them will try to integrate the segregated Woolworth lunch counter in downtown Greensboro.
Let's just go over why we're doing this one more time.
One more time? See, we've been going over it forever.
I've been going over it since I was a kid.
Man, you're from New York, Joe. What do you know about Jim Crow?
You think Greensboro or the South has a patent on racism? Got right in the Trailways bus station restaurant. No color allowed. I mean, how was I supposed to eat? It made you feel like you was less than a man. For truth, it hurt.
What you think people gonna say? I really wonder what Big John Tarpley would say if he knew what we were planning to do.
Tarpley. Dudley High School, right?
Yeah, he was our teacher with the big ideas about civil rights. He never let a day go by or a class end without saying something about the Constitution and what it's really supposed to mean.
I bet you there's a bunch of other teachers at Dudley who would support us in this, like Mr. Bradley, Mr. Wallace.
They've been taught about freedom and dignity, but have seen and experienced the opposite. Teachers and parents have inspired each of them to know who they are and their value as human beings.
I got a lecture from him every night at dinner. My dad was making sure his only son would be on the front line when it came to taking on old Jim Crow. Now that's some big shoes to fill.
This pivotal moment was reflective of the sentiment of many students who had similar discussions on other campuses, especially Bennett College.
We're going down to Woolworths by ourselves.
We're not really by ourselves. There's a lot of people behind us, and not just Negroes, like white people, like Ralph Johns. I believe a bunch of people will help bail us out if anything happens. Your folks, my folks, Attorney Lee, Miss Hargett, and don't forget about Dr. Barnes.
Don't forget the bulletproof vest.
Come on, Ezel, it just might work. Not too many people in the store at that hour. I'll be coming out of ROTC, so I'll be wearing my uniform.
That uniform might even help. And Ralph Johns wants us to stop by his store on the way. Wants us to make sure the news people know what we're doing.
This is not just for us. This is for all of our people. The way it is just ain't worth it.
I feel the same way. I'm just tired of talking about it. Let's do what has to be done.
Man, put it to the vote, JoJo.
McCain.
Uh-huh.
Blair.
Honestly, man, I gotta get...
Ezel.
Okay. Okay.
David.
I'm in. I'll go along.
Okay. But we gotta be careful. We gotta watch what we say and do. Are we set?
Yeah, we're ready.
Let's do it.
What a great day to be an Aggie. Good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the 58th Sit-In Anniversary Celebration. This annual celebration allows us to honor the contributions of 4 courageous freshmen from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University in the fight for equality in the United States, while encouraging a new generation of civil rights champions who had the audacity to believe that all people are created equal. This year's theme is Conscious for the Culture. To be conscious is to be aware, to be vigilant, to be woke. The culture is our shared values, goals, and practices. This morning, we want to make sure that everyone in this room in streaming this event is fully aware, vigilant, and woke to the culture of civil rights. Today's program provides a unique opportunity for social justice leaders from years past to educate, encourage, and uplift the freedoms fighters of today and the future. We want you to leave here knowing the culture of the civil rights movement, how to serve, when and why to kneel, how to act, and most important, how to lead. And we want you to know why you should do it for the culture. Thank you for joining us. We will follow the program as printed. First is the occasion from Honesty Gainey, senior class president of Dudley High School, followed by Lift Every Voice and Sing from our university choir.
Good morning. Exactly 58 years ago, on this day, Ezell Blair Jr., Franklin McCain, Joseph McNiel, and David Richmond left Scott Hall and walked 1 mile to F.W. Woolworth to sit down at a segregated lunch counter. Though they were denied service, the young men refused to give up their seats and stayed until the store closed, only to return on the following days with more students from North Carolina A&T, the Bennett College for Women, and Dudley High School. Over the month of February 1960, similar protests spread to at least 250 major U.S. cities and towns. This single decision to take a stand by sitting down sparked an idea to form the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and inspired the Freedom Rides in 1961, all of which led to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that ended the segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, and natural origin. So today, we honor Jibreel Khazan, Joseph McNiel, Franklin McCain Sr., and David Richmond Sr. for the courage to be agents of change in the face of adversity. Thank you.
Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastising rod, built in the days when born, and long, yet with the steady feet have not our weary. With tears has been watered, oh, we have come, treading our path through the blood of the slaughter, out of the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. Blessed our feet, straight from the places our God where we met thee. Blessed our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to
Thank you, Honesty, and University Choir. To honor the memories of David Richmond Sr. and Franklin McCain Sr., we will now hear from Mr. and Miss Sr., Paul Johnson and Kentona Tinsley.
Good morning, everyone. The late David Linnell Richmond was born in Greensboro, North Carolina, and graduated from the great James B. Dudley High School. He entered North Carolina A&T in fall 1959 and studied business administration and accounting. After leaving A&T, he became a counselor coordinator for the CEDAR program here in Greensboro, where he assisted disadvantaged youth and adults. At his funeral on December 12, 1990, Mr. Richmond was posthumously awarded the Honor Doctor of Humanities degree. He is survived by his 2 children, David Richmond Jr. and Lynn Massenberg. Thank you.
The late Franklin Eugene McCain Sr. was a Charlotte resident. He retired from the Huck's Celanese Corporation, where he held a number of positions in the technical and marketing sales divisions, progressing from development chemist to division executive. He graduated from North Carolina A&T with a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry and biology. Through the years, he also studied and trained at North Carolina State University, Princeton University, Farr Associates, Clemson University, and American Management Association in New York City. He received an honorary Doctor of Humanities degree from North Carolina A&T. He was active in his community while holding leadership positions in the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund Incorporated, Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity, the Bond Campaign for Mecklenburg County, and the National Conference of Christians and Jews, to name a few. He was an elder at Memorial Presbyterian Church and formerly sat on numerous boards, including the University of North Carolina Board of Governors, Bennett College Board of Visitors, and the Trustees Board at North Carolina A&T and North Carolina Central University. He is survived by 3 sons, Franklin E. McCain Jr. and his wife Vicki, Wendell McCain and his wife Lori, and Bert McCain and his wife Keisha, and 6 grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you, Kentona and Paul. We will now have a moment of reflection from Paige Matthews, the Student Government Association President of Bennett College for Women, followed by the recognition of a few special guests by Miss North Carolina A&T State University, Anaya Bradsher.
Good morning. This morning, we are gathered to honor the lives and legacies of the A&T 4. It is only fitting that we take a moment to honor the lives and legacies of their fellow freedom fighters and change agents for their contributions to secure our right to fair treatment. Join me in a moment of reflection. Thank you.
Good morning. I would like to take this opportunity to recognize our special guests in the audience. When I call your name, please stand to be recognized. Members of the Board of Trustees, Chairman Tim King, Ms. Hilda Penix Ragland, Ms. Laura Marr, Mr. Paul Jones, and Mr. Joe Parker. Thank you. Chancellor Harold L. Martin, Sr., members of the Chancellor's Cabinet, thank you. Members of the Dean's Council, thank you. Former members of the Board of Trustees. Current and former members of the Board of Visitors. Members of the National Alumni Association. Members of the North Carolina A&T State University Real Estate Foundation. Elected officials. Guilford County Schools Superintendent Sharon Contreras. Human Rights Medalist Bob Page. Our lovely First Lady, Mrs. Davita Martin. She's absent today. And every Aggie in the room, please stand. Thank you for spending your Thursday morning with us.
Thank you, Paige and Anaya. Now, Student Government Association Attorney General Tyleek McMillan will join us to introduce our dynamic keynote speaker. After that, the next voice you will hear will be that of Ms. April D. Ryan.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce to you Ms. April D. Ryan, a journalist and author. Ms. Ryan has served as a White House correspondent since the Clinton era, with her unique vantage point as the only Black woman reporter covering urban issues for the American urban radio networks, and her news blog, Fabric of America, Ms. Ryan delivers a minority perspective on the news. She can be seen almost daily on CNN as a political analyst and has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Vogue, Cosmopolitan, and Elle magazines, to name a few. A Baltimore, Maryland native and proud Morgan State University alumna, Ms. Ryan gives back to these communities as a mentor to aspiring journalists and helping to develop future broadcasters. She is the author of the award-winning books, The Presidency in Black and White, and her latest release, At Mama's Knee, Mothers and Race in Black and White. Ladies and gentlemen, when I am president of the United States, I hope to have a press secretary just as good as Ms. Ryan. But for now, Aggies, help me to welcome Ms. April D. Ryan.
Oh, wow. Wow. Mr. McMillan. No, let's put it in the atmosphere, President McMillan. Because yes, you can. Good morning, North Carolina A&T. I'm gonna say it again. Good morning, North Carolina A&T. I know you're Aggie proud. I love my HBCUs. I have family who have Aggie pride. You know, former Congressman Ed Towns is my cousin. Yes, I love my cousin Ed. And his son Daryl, and he's got a granddaughter just graduated, Jasmine. I thank you for supporting and loving my family. I am a proud HBCUer myself, Morgan State University in the house. Don't hate! We're just gonna start right there. But I'm gonna say this. There's something about matriculating on an HBCU campus, Chancellor Martin. There's something about it. Something about it. But I want to first, I'm full this morning. I am so full, and I'm going to start my stopwatch because I can talk. And I want to say thank you to Chancellor Martin for having me here today. We met last year and a couple of times, and we had great times together talking about the importance of HBCUs and what they offer, not just our individual communities, the nation, but globally. I want to thank the Board of Trustees. I want to thank all the political leaders for being here. As I said, I'm full, and I bring you greetings from the American Urban Radio Networks, where I've served as the White House correspondent for the past 21 years. And it's kind of strange, a lot of people just finding out who I am this year, but hey. Been there, done that, got a t-shirt and washed it and wore it again. And I bring you greetings from the mighty CNN. And I hope you watch every night. I'm full this morning. I'm so full this morning because I am a student of history. You cannot sit in that beautiful, over 200-year-old place that I work in every day and have the blessing to call on 4 American presidents to ask them questions and for them to call me by name. Maybe they might call me other names too, but it's a blessing. It's a blessing. This February 1, the beginning of Black History Month, where we celebrate courageousness. Courageousness of 4 young African American men, 58 years ago, that's not a long time, who said they didn't understand what was going to come later on, but there was a dis-ease in their spirit, Chancellor Martin, a dis-ease in their spirit to say, I'm hungry, why can't I eat? Something so simple. I'm hungry, why can't I eat? So their consciousness would not allow them to let the day be at the Woolworth, which is now like our Macy's, our Nordstrom's, you know, the Nordstrom's Cafe or what have you. They wanted to go into Woolworths. They wanted to go into the restaurant at the bus or the train station. They just wanted to eat like everyone else. But at that time, there was a separation. White-only counter, white-only bathroom, white-only water fountain. Wasn't right. But 58 years ago, these 4 freshmen, how old were they? How old were you? 17, 18? And a child shall lead them. And a child shall lead them. 17, 18. At that time, what were you thinking about? Seriously. What are 17 and 18-year-olds thinking about now? Ooh. You see me post it? See, like I was telling Chancellor Martin now, I find the times different but yet the same. 17 and 18-year-olds then versus 17 and 18-year-olds now. And I want you to hear me, because I got a tween, a teenager, and a tween. We now get upset and we hide behind an emoji on the Twitter and on the Facebook and on the Instagram and on the Snapchat and even on a Musical.ly. We hide behind an emoji and say, I don't like what you said. Take that. Okay, Ed, I can block you. I don't like what you did. Take that. I said it, yeah, and I'm standing behind it. What you standing behind, an emoji? You telling me something, you in my face on paper or on my smartphone. But 58 years ago, there were 4 men who said, 4 young men who said, I'm not gonna take it. I thank God there wasn't Twitter back then for them. Instead of tweeting Woolworths, take that. What they did
was beyond courageous. They went strategically, peacefully, and quietly, sat at that counter when they were told that you can't. They were intimidated by a police officer smacking his billy club. They sat because it wasn't right, but they knew that people would come. People would help. If I get in trouble, people would help. We saw it on the video. People would come. People would help. People would bail us out. The consciousness at that time was there was a dis-ease. We were not equal. I think back 58 years ago, but I'm also going to think back 50 years ago. Because what they did was set the ball rolling for so much to happen. I'm going to tell you, we're now at a time, this is a very historic time, we're now upon the time where we see the commemoration of the garbage workers, the death of the garbage workers. We're 50 years out this year of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We're 50 years out. We're 50 years out from the Poor People's Campaign. Remember that? We're 50 years out. Get this one. From the Kerner Commission report. You remember that? No, I don't think you do. The Kerner Commission report was put together by, well, LBJ, the former president, the president at the time, asked the commission to come together to put a report together to find out why black folks were rioting in several cities. Why were we rioting? We were rioting because we were in disease. We were rioting at that time because, again, what happened yesterday is still happening today. There were police issues in the community 50 years ago. And where are we now? We're talking about who taking a knee. What happened yesterday is still today. But 58 years ago, and I say this as a reporter who's covering these issues, you can't change history, although people want to. You can't change it. If it had not been for these four men to sit at that counter, the ball would not have really started rolling like it should have. Four young men. They started down the street here at the Greensboro Woolworths. And then they started around in different places in Nashville. And then they did it in other places like in Baltimore, not far from Morgan State University at this place, this drugstore in Northwood Shopping Center. They sparked a movement of young people. Young people are the ones who lead and change the dynamic, change the atmosphere. But the problem today is when we look at yesterday versus today, it's different but yet the same. But yet, are we coming together and giving them the history and the knowledge and understanding of what happened then and what's happening now? There's a link. There's a correlation. It's not necessarily about a president. And I'm going to say that again. I don't know which side of the spectrum you sit on. I don't care. But the issue is it's not about 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I'm going to tell you why. It's about you. If there's any dis-ease in your spirit, they listen. Change happens when you go against the grain, when you dare to be different. These young people helped spark a movement that created the Civil Rights Act, that allowed us to be able to go and eat in public places, to be able to sleep in hotel rooms off of interstates. And then the next year, there was the Voting Rights Act. These young people, because they sat in nonviolently. They brought attention to not only just black people, but with white people. It takes all of us to come together. And see, this blueprint that sometimes I wonder if the community has forgotten, because as a reporter, I'm not seeing it. People talk about, oh, on Twitter, I'm upset. On Twitter, you hear everybody talking about, I'm upset. But what you gonna do about it? What you gonna do about it? I hear these people talk and talk, but I'm gonna give you an example of how one person talking to another person can make a difference. Twitter can galvanize people, but it doesn't make you watch and make change like you think it does. Let's go back. There are moments in time and in history that we remember. We remember when President Kennedy was killed. We remember when the assassination happened of Martin Luther King. We remember with the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. We remember when Barack Obama became president of the United States, when Wolf Blitzer shouted out, Barack Obama is the 44th president of the United States. And we also remember last year when Wolf Blitzer also said, Donald Trump is the 45th president of the United States. Some of you may still be in the fetal position, but it's okay. It's okay. And I'm gonna tell you why. It's not, and I'm gonna say it over and over and over again. Yes, he is the president of the United States of America. Yes, Barack Obama was the president of the United States of America. Yes, George W. Bush was the president of the United States of America. Yes, Bill Clinton was too. But you gotta understand, it's we the people. And that's what I think people forget. And today on February 1, the first day of Black History Month, we should remember it more than ever when you sat in. You sat in. I'm gonna give you an example of how people in Washington are watching you. Inauguration Day, I've been at every Inauguration Day for the last 21 years. Trust me, I've been there. Typically, it's hard to move around. This last election day, not inauguration day, this last inauguration day, I was able to move around the crowd easily. Don't believe what they tell you, it's true. There were empty spaces on the bleachers. I was able, normally during inauguration, it takes you like 15 minutes, takes you about an hour to walk around, right, Bernard? But I was able to walk easily. So, yes, it's true. But the next day. So Inauguration Day, it was the biggest crowd ever. But the next day, a couple women said, why don't we get together and start walking? There was a blueprint that somebody laid down a while ago. I think his name was Martin, and some kids sat in at a counter. Let's look at what they did, and let's figure, maybe you think if we get up and come together and march, So a couple women started walking around London, Sydney, Australia, Lansing, Michigan, New York, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. The next day, they watched so much so, and this is what I'm saying, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and people just think it's about Twitter. It's not. Twitter is great. I use it. You saw some stuff about me last week, but I ain't going there. But Miss Piggy is fabulous, isn't she? I wasn't going to say it, but anyway, moving on. But the next day, it caused my dear friend Sean Spicer to come out screaming in that ill-fitting suit. There's never been a crowd the size of what you saw yesterday. Da, da, da. Not true. The reason why they paid attention is because the crowd the next day stood up and said, we're not going to take this. The next day. So February 1 happened, but what happened the next day? It kept coming, it kept coming, and it kept coming. And I'm going to tell you, there's a story that holds a special place in my heart, because if it had not been for these 17 and 18-year-old men, I got a 15-year-old at home. I'm like, if she sits there, I'm like, baby, you sure you want to do this? Think about it, being a parent of a 17-year-old who is going to sit in when the billy clubs, people being killed over issues of just wanting equality. They sat down. They sparked a movement. If it had not been for these 17 and 18-year-old men, 4 men to sit down we would not have had the Civil Rights Act. And I'm gonna bear down on the Civil Rights Act a little bit because there's a story that really is in my heart that I want to share with you. It was tough back then. How many of you lived back in Jim Crow and segregation? All right, so you know. For you Aggie young folk, listen. My mother used to tell me, look it up. I'm gonna tell you to Google it. There's a gentleman by the name of Charles Drew. How many of you know who Charles Drew is? Amen, that's right, that's what I'm talking about. And it's sad this day that I go places and they don't know who Charles Drew is. But Aggie, I know Aggies, my Aggies know. So Charles Drew, this brilliant black mind, this brilliant mind, regardless of race, he revolutionized the blood donation system in this nation. He revolutionized the blood donation system in this nation. A black man. Now, a lot of us have benefited from transfusions. Thank you, Charles Drew. Amen, clap, that's right. And I had to get the rest of this story from his daughter because you know in the black household, we get it. Like, and you know this and you know that. And some of it is, a lot of it's true, and then everybody likes to add on to really build it up. So I found that my late mother would always tell me, but I wish I could tell them, Mommy, that part wasn't true, but this part is. But here's the story. Charles Drew was driving down to Khazan or whomever, going to work, doing whatever's house down south. And at that time, we could not sleep in the hotel off the side of the road. Right, gentlemen? We had to call cousin Shay or Joe Bob, can I come stay with you? It's true. So he was driving and he was tired. This man, this black man who revolutionized the blood donation system in this nation that all of us, regardless of race, color, what have you, religion, are benefiting from, he was tired. He fell asleep. He fell asleep. This is what the racist South did and racism did. He fell asleep at the wheel. His injuries were grave. When he was found, when he was taken to the hospital, this great man who revolutionized the blood donation system in this nation, they wanted to take him in the black portion of the hospital. Everything was segregated. Downstairs, the basement, the black portion of the hospital. Probably inferior medical attention, probably, because it was black, and I'm gonna say it. But a white doctor saw him and said, this is Charles Drew. This white doctor took him upstairs, but he still died. But he took him upstairs, but this is what segregation did. And if it had not been for these 4 young men, children, who had a dis-ease in their spirit to say, I want to change the situation. A young girl from Baltimore by the name of April Ryan would not be able to ask questions about urban America, which still has the highest numbers of negatives in almost every category. That's not race baiting, that's truth. But I think about history. I think about the dis-ease in the spirit. It's not just now. It's been here from the time that we were brought here on ships, in the belly of those ships, in the Middle Passage. And when you think, and this is fact too, when you think about the Middle Passage, how slaves were on those ships, and sometimes those on the ships who were steering the ships and manning the ships took the slaves and threw them overboard and changed the shark pattern from Africa. Look it up if you don't believe, Google it. I think about the disease in the spirit from those moments. I think about a woman who had no formal education like you get at this wonderful, magnificent, the largest HBCU in this nation, North Carolina A&T. I think about this woman who had no formal education but had this yearning for something that was different, something that was fair, something that was right. I think about this woman who we call Grandma, who could grace the $20 bill, and how she said, I could have freed thousands more if only they knew they were slaves. I think about the consciousness for the culture at that time. I think about the dis-ease and the spirit. And then I think about these 4 young men, children, who helped change the course of our society. You know, yeah, we eat the chicken, sausage, and the biscuit. Come to these every year, but do you really understand what it is about? Do you really understand? I want to say this to you. I celebrate with you today with a heart that's heavy because I see history replaying itself in a lot of ways. You can't forget, because if you forget, it is as if it did not happen. I celebrate Ezekiel A. Blair Jr., the late Franklin Eugene McCain Sr., Joseph Alfred McNiel, the late David Richmond. I want the 2 surviving 4 to stand and their children to stand, please. Let's give them a big round of applause. At 17, I wasn't socially conscious. I was listening to Dougie Fresh on the show. But you cannot sit in the presence of greatness and not reflect on what they did for you. You cannot sit here and say, would I sit in? Seriously, would you have the fortitude to do that today? Would you be able to be called out on Twitter today? Called out your name? Who are we today? I think about just a couple of weeks ago, around Dr. King's birthday. And I asked, I'm a student of history and I love to talk to people who were part of history. I talked to Mary Frances Berry, the former head of the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights, who's a friend of mine. And she's got a new book coming out about resisting. And she said, I said, when Dr. King, around Dr. King's birthday, I said, talk to me about Dr. King. And she regaled me. And we all are a formulation of stories. We are all a formulation of stories. Everyone has a story. So she would tell me every year on Dr. King's birthday, she would always, when Coretta Scott King was alive, she would always talk to the widow of Dr. King, and they would say, what would Martin do? What would Martin do? So she said, she gave me this, she said, Martin would organize. I said, well, everybody keeps talking about this organize. What does organize mean? Organize means leverage. How do we figure out to get what we want? It's not just coming together. Once you come together and start sitting in, you got to figure out, how do we leverage to get what we want? It's not just about sitting in or marching. There's a next step, like there is the next day. So what do? She said they organize, they get like-minded people, and they figure out how to leverage to get what they want. And they figure out who will do this. Okay, you were able to sit in, you were able to go to jail, you were able to give the money, you were able to go to the garden and get the butter beans and the tomatoes to feed the ones that are sitting in, or the ones who are trying to march. So they leveraged and figured it out. There is something to be said about the simplicity, but yet the intelligence of how they pulled this together in the past. In 2018, do we have the conscience to sit in today? In 2018, I think about that because as I'm still reporting and I'm still seeing, again, the black community with the highest numbers of negatives in almost every category. Yes, the black unemployment rate has gone down, but yes, the black unemployment rate is still the highest than any other group, 6.8%, versus white America, 3.7%, versus Hispanic America, 4.9%, versus Asian America, 2.5%. Yeah, we got our red bottoms and our Mercedes Benz, but guess what? And we clutching our pearls this morning. We're still hurting. So what's changed from 58 years ago? We've come a long way. We can be educated together, we can go to church together, and we can stay in the same hotel and eat at the same restaurants. But we're still in a time of disparity. And I'm saying this as a black woman, but most importantly as a woman who covers this from the highest levels in this land and globally. But I'm gonna leave you with something. I'm gonna leave you with something that really, and I hope I can get it out because it bothered me. It goes back to the birthday of Dr. King. I talked to also Amos Brown. He's on the national board of the NAACP. And he was one of those students of Dr. King at Morehouse College. He had that one class with a few students, like Julian Bond was in that class, the late Julian Bond, and Dr. Brown and a couple other people. Dr. Brown called me, and we talked periodically. And he said, Dr. King died in vain. And tears just came streaming, and it still bothers me to this day. The question is, are you content? If not, where is your disease? Because I'm not reporting on it. I see you on Twitter. But I don't see you sitting in. I don't see you marching. Dr. King called on all dreamers. He called on those 4 too. It was about them as well. They were 58. The speech was later. But the dream was still in the spirit of the deceased. So as I take my seat today, I ask you today, where's your conscience for the culture? And would you sit in? Aspire to inspire. Thank you. You cannot sit here and say, would I sit in? Seriously. Would you have the fortitude to do that today? Would you be able to be called out on Twitter today? Called out your name? Who are we today? I think about just a couple of weeks ago, around Dr. King's birthday. And I asked, I'm a student of history and I love to talk to people who were part of history. I talked to Mary Frances Berry, the former head of the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights, who's a friend of mine. And she's got a new book coming out about resisting. And she said, I said, when Dr. King, around Dr. King's birthday, I said, talk to me about Dr. King. And she regaled me. We all are a formulation of stories. We are all a formulation of stories. Everyone has a story. So she would tell me, every year on Dr. King's birthday, she would always, when Coretta Scott King was alive, she would always talk to the widow of Dr. King, and they would say, what would Martin do? What would Martin do? So she said, she gave me this, she said, Martin would organize. I said, well, everybody keeps talking about this organize. What does organize mean? Organize means leverage. How do we figure out to get what we want? It's not just coming together. Once you come together and start sitting in, you got to figure out, how do we leverage to get what we want? It's not just about sitting in or marching. There's a next step, like there is the next day. So what do? She said they organize, they get like-minded people, and they figure out how to leverage to get what they want. And they figure out who will do this. Okay, you were able to sit in, you were able to go to jail, you were able to give the money, you were able to go to the garden and get the butter beans and tomatoes to feed the ones that are sitting in, or the ones who are trying to march. So they leveraged and figured it out. there is something to be said about the simplicity, but yet the intelligence of how they pulled this together in the past. In 2018, do we have the conscience to sit in today? In 2018, I think about that because as I'm still reporting and I'm still seeing, again, the black community with the highest numbers of negatives in almost every category. Yes, the black unemployment rate has gone down, but yes, the black unemployment rate is still the highest than any other group, 6.8%, versus white America, 3.7%, versus Hispanic America, 4.9%, versus Asian America, 2.5%. Yeah, we got our red bottoms and our Mercedes-Benz, but guess what? And we clutching our pearls this morning. We're still hurting. So what's changed from 58 years ago? We've come a long way. We can be educated together, we can go to church together, and we can stay in the same hotel and eat at the same restaurants. But we're still in a time of disparity. And I'm saying this as a black woman, but most importantly as a woman who covers this from the highest levels in this land and globally. But I'm gonna leave you with something. I'm gonna leave you with something that really, and I hope I can get it out because it bothered me. It goes back to the birthday of Dr. King. I talked to also Amos Brown. He's on the national board of the NAACP. And he was one of those students of Dr. King at Morehouse College. He had that one class with a few students like Julian Bond was in that class, the late Julian Bond, and Dr. Brown and a couple other people. Dr. Brown called me, and we talked periodically. And he said, Dr. King died in vain. And tears just came streaming, and it still bothers me to this day. The question is, are you content? If not, where is your disease? Because I'm not reporting on it. I see you on Twitter. But I don't see you sitting in. I don't see you marching. Dr. King called on all dreamers. He called on those 4 too. It was about them as well. They were 58. The speech was later. But the dream was still in the spirit of the deceased. So as I take my seat today, I ask you today, where's your conscience for the culture? And would you sit in? Aspire to inspire. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan, for those amazing words and for reminding us that what happened yesterday is still today. So we need to learn how to leverage and be just as conscious as those 4 freshmen 58 years ago. I would like to welcome our visionary leader, Chancellor Harold L. Martin Sr., to award this year's Human Rights Medalist.
Good morning. Let me thank Ms. Ryan again for those inspiring words for us to think about, and in particular, the message to our students as well. And so thank you for being with us this morning and help us celebrate 58 years, February 1st, of the A&T 4. Let's give Ms. Ryan another round of applause, please. Thank you. Thank you. Before I award this year's Human Rights Medal, I'd like to thank our students and all students who are present with us today. Let me ask you all to stand, please. Student leaders, all students, Bennett College students, Dudley students, all students from our various institutions. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for our student leaders for planning our activities today and the inspiring work that you do for our university as well and your continued involvement in what's going on in our communities as well. You know, I was thinking about, and I won't prolong this, but I was thinking about Ms. Ryan's comments, and in particular, as I thought about her comments, I was reflecting on what I was doing when in the late 50s and 60s, when so much was in a very disruptive state in our nation. And for some reason, my parents came to mind as part of this conversation and my thoughts. And I reflected on my parents because it is through them, uneducated, lack of opportunities. And I thought about the conversations around the dinner table. I thought about the evening news when my father would insist that we would sit and listen to what was going on in our nation. And I thought about their aspirations for my brother, my sister, and me. It's emotional for me. I thought about their expectations for a life for us better than their own. And I'm sure there are many of you in this room who have a similar story. And that story around our dinner table and in our small family room where we watched the black and white TV with rabbit ears, you remember those? That kept alive in our home a conversation about the inequities in our society. And that conversation spread into our communities, in our church, in our black schools, K-12, that educated us. And some of the very best, most demanding teachers I've ever experienced in my entire life. And as I say to our students all the time, failure was not an option. Failure was not an option. Because if you got up every morning and went to school and were not giving your very best effort, you weren't just disappointing your mom and your dad. You were disappointing the neighbor. You were disappointing the preacher of your church, who happened to be my father. You were disappointing all those teachers who would pluck you in the head or pinch you when you were misbehaving or not paying attention. We remember those, don't we? Failure was not an option. So when we got up in the morning and went to school, we were giving our best effort. We were looking to the future. We were looking to a brighter future. A brighter future that the A&T 4 helped to ensure was going to occur for people who look like me. So we celebrate this morning the incredible, courageous behaviors and the energy of the A&T 4. We do. And I use often, as I move on to my appointed task, my mother as an example. There was no meaner, demanding, but yet inspiring woman in my life who always kept us on task, who always kept us on task. And that's why we're here today, to celebrate. We really are. the A&T4. And I thank you for being with us. It is such an incredible crowd, an engaging crowd, to be with us this morning. So it's my pleasure to be with you and to present North Carolina A&T State University's Human Rights Medal. The Human Rights Medal is awarded annually to recognize individuals who have striven to correct social justice and who have contributed to the betterment of the world. The award honors individuals whose courageous actions are a reflection of the extraordinary tactics demonstrated by then freshman Ezell A. Blair Jr., Franklin Eugene McCain Sr., Joseph Alfred McNiel, and the late David Richmond Jr. This year's honoree is Mr. Bob Page. Chairman. Bob Page is chairman and CEO of Replacements Unlimited, a visionary who managed to turn his passion of searching for china and crystal at flea markets into a business that has grown into the world's largest retailer of vintage and contemporary china, crystal, silver, and collectibles. As a gay man, Bob knows firsthand the pain of discrimination. That is what drove him to create Workplace Free of Fear and Bigotry. Replacements is a company that embraces diversity in all of its forms, where people feel welcome and accepted. His staff hails from more than 30 countries and represents an array of ethnicities, cultures, backgrounds, and experiences. As a nationally respected leader in the fight for equality and social justice, Bob has championed human dignity by becoming one of the most outspoken businessmen against North Carolina's anti-LGBTQ marriage amendment and House Bill 2, which targeted the transgender community. Building upon his late father's teaching of making our community better for everyone, Bob and his staff at Replacements has partnered with Habitat for Humanity on numerous bills and provided clothing for hundreds of needy men, women, and children through his project Bob's Closet. He also supports organizations like the National Conference for Community and Justice of the Piedmont Triad, Triad Health Project, the NAACP of North Carolina, and many more. Bob is a graduate of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He resides here in Greensboro with his husband, Dale Fredrickson, and his two sons, Owen and Ryan. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating Bob Page.
Thank you so very much. I'm really overwhelmed to be receiving this award. In my parents' first home, there was no running water. I remember my mother cooking on a wood stove. We didn't have very much, but my father was always sharing what we did have with our neighbors. Growing up poor in rural North Carolina in the 50s and 60s, I saw a lot of injustice. That taught me much about the need to stand up or to sit down or to kneel. To be recognized by a pioneer in the civil rights movement on this special anniversary touches me more than I can begin to say. What we've tried to do at Replacements Limited and in the community is very similar to what you are doing here. We affirm the dignity and worth of all people. My partner, Dale, and I have twin boys who are 18 years old who were born in Vietnam. We adopted them as infants almost 18 years ago. We also have another teenager from Nigeria living with us. Our sons are people of color. We worry about them because of what we see on the news. Those of us who care about human rights still have a lot of work to do. Martin Luther King said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Sometimes we have setbacks, and to me, that makes it apparent why we must all work together to fight bias and discrimination against any of our brothers and sisters. The A&T 4 inspire me to keep fighting, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Thank you again for this wonderful acknowledgement. It means a great deal to me. Thank you.
Congratulations, Mr. Page. We will now have remarks from the surviving members of the A&T 4, Jibreel Khazan and Joseph McNiel, as well as the sons and namesakes of Franklin McCain and David Richmond, as printed in the program.
Good morning. I am so proud to be here to represent my father this morning. On behalf of my godfather, Mr. McCain, he would be so proud of the students being here because he was wanting the students to be more of a part of this breakfast. And I applaud you. Ms. Ryan, thank you for those words. And it made me reflect when some 40 years ago, when I was a freshman at Wake Forest playing football, and I had to come in as a substitute for my father for a class and talk about him. And you know how you grow up with somebody, and this man raised me, I'm so proud of him, but never asked him tough questions. And plus, I'm just going around doing my thing. You know, so I was in class and I felt inadequate. And I called him up. And he came and spoke to the class, and where I was in the back as a student. I was so proud because that was my light bulb moment where it hit me. All I was doing was just playing football, having fun. And these young men were out being conscious of the culture and risking their lives. And that's when I really got a deep appreciation of this man. I like my mother and sister to stand up. My father was a family man. He loved his family. He loved his parents, John and Moselle, that instilled those great things in him. I applaud the teachers at Dudley High School that instilled that consciousness for these men that not often mentioned. I applaud them. Mr. Page, I applaud you and congratulations for being a pioneer yourself. And in closing, I'd like to leave you with these words that are on my father's grave. It says, "Love leads to freedom." Thank you.
Good morning. Dawn, I knew her as Dawn Forbes, but you folks know her as Dawn Murphy. And she was the chair of this event. She told me I had 2 minutes. And Dawn knows it's hard for me sometimes to get my name out in 2 minutes. But I'm going to try to adhere to her request. But let me begin by saying that, you know, when my father is no longer here, as Chip's father is no longer here, but as the children, you hear their voices. They speak to you. You remember things that they said, and even when you're doing things that in everyday life, you hear their voices. I'll tell you a story real quickly. I was traveling a couple weeks ago, and I was in a hotel room, and I came out the shower, and I could hear my daddy talking, which I sometimes can, but this time it seemed really real. So I get back in the room, and he's on the television. He had done an AARP commercial. And so he actually was talking, so I wasn't going crazy. But let me say, what he would want me to say, and we, the children, are products of our father, but we're also products of our mother. And my mother was a good Georgia Southern belle from Bennett College. And she, and she would always say that you got to start off by saying thank you. So I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the university for your continued remembrance of our father and of our fathers and Uncle Joe and Uncle Ezel, that this is not falling on deaf ears, because this is our history. This is the history of the nation, but it's also the history of A&T. So we've got a lot to be proud about. To April, great, great words. I'm a big fan of yours, and I appreciate it. Had no idea that DT was your cousin. DT lived 2 doors down the hall from me when I was at A&T. So I'm going to call him up and tell him he didn't tell me about that. And to Bob, a man of change, a man of influence, a man of great courage, we thank you, and we're glad to have you in this community. Congratulations on your award. And lastly, to the students, because that's what this is really all about, the students. If you don't remember anything else today, remember that these 4 men were these 4 boys were 17 and 18 years old. They were just like you are today. They had a vision, they had a strategy, and they executed. I am sure, and if my father were here today, he would say, I know that there are some future leaders, future movers and shakers, future game changers in this room, in this student body. You know who you are. You know who you are. So in your words, not mine, and I got a student here, so I know these words, you need to stay awake and stay awoke. Thank you.
Now, I know what you're all thinking. He brought the encyclopedia with him. I've been warned, don't go over 2.5 minutes. Grace and peace be unto you, love and mercy to all the people in this room and those who are to come after us. In the name of Allah, the compassionate and merciful. Allah means source of our first and last breath. To whom all praise is due forever. It's not a religion, it's what is. Think about our last breath. And it comes from that one. You got it. Not religion. With thanks and praises to the life giver, our parents, our teachers, our guardians, Professor Dr. April D. Ryan, the White House correspondent. We thank you for your timely message, and I hope everyone gets it and takes it to our children. They are our future. That's why I'm here today. I have a 7-year-old granddaughter. She said, Grandpa, she said, yes, 5 years old. I'm a princess now. You are? When I get to be 16, I'll be the queen of the house. You will? Are you listening to me? That's what's coming at us, our way to freedom. Especially want to thank a person and 2 people in the room, Judge Attorney Fry and Sister Mrs. Fry, for the time and energy that they have given to A&T over, can I say, over 65 years? 65 years. 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 I asked him about becoming a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. He said, "You're an alpha, you can't do it." Okay, thank you. Under our feet, it's called Northwest Morocco. South America is called Southwest Morocco. We are in Morocco and we are in Africa. Can you dig? I've been searching every which way. I'm going to go now. Bless y'all. Hope you be free.
One of my many jobs and tasks is that of a cleanup man. We thank you for your patience. We thank you for, once again, extending to us a courtesy. And we thank you for being who you are. I have 3 points I'd like to share with you today. And the first is about people. And I'm reminded on February 1st, 58 years ago, our first effort to try to get people who felt and agreed with us to join into something which we felt very strongly about. We felt strongly about racial segregation and how it impacted our parents and us and our job opportunities. But more than just feeling the losses that we were experiencing, we were asked to give of ourselves. Nobody came with money to participate into the sit-ins. I can recall the evening of February the 1st, approaching senior members of our class and saying, "We need your help. We're 17 years old, but we know that if we don't take some of these things on in life and stand and defy unjust laws, when will it happen?" There was no timetable. So people gave of themselves, they gave of their money, they gave of their legal services, they gave of their bodies, and they gave of their lives. I think about Swarner, Goodman, and Cheney, examples of people whose lives were lost because of civil rights. We know that what we do every year keeps their thoughts alive, but we need to think of it more rather than a once-a-year event. The second thought I'd like to leave with you, in addition to honoring those who have gone before us, is the fact that whenever I come to this campus, something different takes place. I used to think this might be hallowed ground. Something happened here more than just Scott Hall bull session. Loftier thoughts, giving of oneself, service before self. These were ideas entertained to us. Don't take discrimination. It can last forever unless we do something about it. And so, all those who can't be here today, we represent them. We represent an event that proved to have a dramatic impact on the life of our country. We are today because of protests and other people giving of themselves and their lives, so that we, you and I and all of us here, can live with a sense of dignity We're all God's children. We all understand the value of respect. And thank you very much for sharing these ideas with us and our families. So part of my cleanup job is to say, once again, thank you. All of us thank you, the families of McCain and Richmond and Blair and my granddaughter. We thank you all for taking the baton and carrying it forward in life. Thanks again.